Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Planning Committee. For the benefit of members of the public, please be aware that while the meeting is being held in public, only those who have been registered may speak. Before we commence, the clerk is going to outline how the meeting will run, and so without further ado, I'll hand over to her.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees in person refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference for our viewers. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chair. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear a recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave by the nearest exit and the Riviera staff will assist you. Once outside, please assemble in front of the tennis courts to the seaward side of the building. Please also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee, and this will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chair will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chair will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. The Chair will then confirm with the planning officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting over to the Chair, Councillor Maddison.
Many thanks, Clerk. And the first item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies or updates, please, to the membership of the committee?
Thank you, Chair, we do. I can confirm that apologies have been received from Councillor Tolchard and Councillor Pentney, and in accordance with the wishes of the Conservative group, Councillor Brooke is substituting for Councillor Tolchard, and Councillor Barbara Lewis and Councillor Tyman are substituting in respect of the 2 Conservative vacancies on the Planning Committee.
Okay, thank you. Turning to the minutes next. Members, are you happy to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee which took place on the 13th of November 2023? Is there a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder, please. That's Councillor Jones proposing. Thank you, Councillor Fox. To the vote now. All members in favour of approving the minutes, please raise your hands. So that's Councillor 6.
Councillor Tyman. Ah, there we are.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, unanimous.
The minutes have been approved. Declarations of interest. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests regarding any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. Thank you. And do any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests in any of the items on today's agenda?
No.
Thank you. Are there any urgent items, please, Clerk?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Excellent. Well, it's a short agenda today. We only have 2 applications. So let's make a start with the first, which is item number 5. This item is to consider the former dairy Crest depot, Parkfield Road, Torquay, application number P/2023/0131. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak, but before they do so, I will ask Mr. Scott Jones to introduce the application, please.
Thank you. So the application site is the former milk depot that sits between Lymington Road and Parkfield Road, approximately 1 kilometre north of Torquay town centre, in an area that has a mixed commercial and residential character. The site is currently under redevelopment towards a residential use, where there is a planning consent over the wider site for 48 apartments and 7 dwellings under planning permission P 2020-0497. This application seeks full planning permission for 44 apartments, which is principally an altered scheme for the 48 apartments previously consented on this part of the wider milk depot site. Firstly, I have a couple of slides regarding the context. This first one is the local plan designations map that shows no particular designations over the land, but it does show a linear flood risk area running through the site, north to south, down the valley, following the culverted waterway underneath the highway. In terms of further context, the Grade 2 listed Penny's Cottage sits to the north across the road junction, and adjacent there is a wooded bank on the opposite side of Parkfield Road, which sits under the Urban Landscape Protection Area and Local Wildlife Site designations. In terms of the Torquay neighbourhood plan, the site is an allocated housing site and notes an approximate yield, i.e. number of units, of 40. It's identified in the red. The adjacent wooded bank and green space on the opposite side of Parkfield Road is also a designated local green space within the Torquay neighbourhood plan. And the hatched pink areas with it identify employment zones. So this is a photo that shows the site prior to the commencement of its redevelopment towards the residential use, where the site was redundant, overgrown and largely covered by hard stand and a number of ad hoc buildings and structures. The site was subsequently cleared and redeveloped under planning permission previously stated, which consented the demolition and redevelopment to form 55 units in total. In terms of how the site looks now, this aerial view is relatively up to date with what members saw today on the earlier site visit. On the left-hand side of the slide, there is the 7 dwellings completed under the recent permission at the northern end of the site. On the right-hand side, there is the substantially complete apartment building, which is in a very similar location, scale and form for the 48-unit scheme previously approved. In terms of context, the mixed residential and commercial character is clearly evident, as is the close proximity to the substantial wooded bank. This is a similar view just from the opposite angle, looking across Lymington Road towards the apartment building. And so moving on to the proposals. So as mentioned, this is a full application for the provision of a single apartment block for 44 units with parking and landscaping. The proposal principally mirrors the form and detail of the development consented under P 2020-0497, with relatively minor modifications to the unit numbers, i.e. 4 less, together with some elevation and detail amendments, and minor amendments to the layout and internal ancillary areas. The proposal retains a single large apartment building and mirrors its size and location. Moving on to the internal layout, the undercroft provides 42 spaces out of the total provision of 49, along with bin storage and cycle storage, and along with plant room space. There's access to the floors via lift and stairs, and the layout retains adequate parking, cycle, and waste storage facilities for the building. Floors 1 to 3 are principally provide a level of accommodation aligned with the previous consent, with 12 units per floor, 34 of which, of the 36 units, are 2-bed units. The units are supported by balconies or recessed terraces to provide some private outdoor amenity space, in conjunction with the wider, larger communal space that will be provided to the east of the building. Going up through the building, just a similar arrangement until we get to the uppermost floor. So this is the internal layout for the fourth floor, where the key amendments are. So the key principal changes are that the apartment numbers are dropped from 12 units to 8 to provide fewer but larger units, and also the recessed building lines at either gable end to provide gabled covered terraces for 4 of the 8 apartments. The upper floor introduces 4 3-bed apartments into the scheme, which broadens the mix of apartments and presents 4 more generously sized 2-bed units as well. Moving on to the west elevation facing Parkfield Road, we have the previously approved and the proposed elevations. So the previously approved are is the bottom half of the slide. So the general form and arrangement mirrors the previous consent. The key changes are at roof level, where the provision of 14 dormers in place of 4 dormers and the numerous roof lights are shown. And below that, the key changes are the divisions within the windows and doors, as shown. So moving on to the east elevation facing Lymington Road. Again, we have the previously approved elevation at the lower part of the slide and the proposed on the upper half. Again, the key changes are similar to those on the opposite side in terms of, at roof level, the provision of more dormers, where 10 dormers are proposed in place of the 4 dormers and roof lights previously approved. Again, below, the key changes are the divisions within the windows and the doors, as shown. Moving on to the north elevation, which faces the entrance to the development. The proposal before you is the top right, and the previously consented detail is the bottom left on this slide. Again, the key change is the introduction of the recessed upper floor, which is considered to add some visual interest, along with the subtle rearrangement of the window positions and the division, which combined are considered to present a slightly more uniform arrangement and one which is deemed more positive. So this is the south elevation facing the adjacent residential building at the end of the site. Again, the proposed is the top right and the previously consented detail is the bottom left. The key change again is the introduction of the recessed upper floor, but also the introduction of more windows than previously consented. Again, the combined proposals present a slightly more uniform arrangement and one that is deemed positive. The impact of the changes on the adjacent neighbour is duly managed through the use of obscure glazing on the majority of the windows, which will not impact the quality of the proposed apartments due to the dual aspect of the apartments. So these are the proposed sections and the approved sections, which shows the building principally of a similar scale, with just a minor change in the overall height, floor levels and overall height. So quickly moving on to the proposed drainage, the surface water runoff is again proposed to be managed through a controlled discharge to the public sewer via the attenuation tank, underneath the landscaped area. This is shown with the yellow marking. So just some photos of the development, which include the changes being proposed. Parkfield Road, this is the Lymington Road side. And the 2 gable ends, which obviously members would have seen today on the site visit. And we also have an indicative image submitted, showing the overall character of the building. So in terms of the key issues and material considerations, obviously the committee report details these. In terms of principal summary, In terms of principle of the development, drawing together the policy landscape, there is clear support for the provision of a residential use. This is based on the site's brownfield character and location within the central residential area, and also its allocation within the Torquay neighbourhood plan for housing. And it also considers the recent planning consents for residential use as a material consideration. In terms of design and visual impact, and all matters considered, the material form and overall character of the building is considered positive, and one which maintains a suitably scaled and detailed building for its context, largely similar to the previously consented building, and one which obviously adequately acknowledges local character. In terms of amenity, having regard for the living environment for future occupants and the future relationship of the development with adjacent plots, the scheme is considered to provide a good standard of accommodation and will not unduly impact the adjacent occupiers. In terms of highways and movement, the access is aligned with the previous consent and is considered acceptable. Parking standards are met, and there is also policy-compliant bicycle and waste storage for occupants. Confirmation of private waste collection and the provision of updated swept paths that has demonstrated that adequate manoeuvring for waste vehicles is achieved, and an updated travel plan has satisfied all matters raised by the Highway Authority. In terms of ecology and trees, subject to the proposed planning conditions that positively frame the construction and operational ecology outcomes, the proposal is considered acceptable on ecology and biodiversity grounds. And in terms of flood risk and drainage, the development is considered adequately resilient to the risks of flooding, and there are supportive comments from the Environment Agency. This is principally due to the raised floor levels of the development and the use of the undercroft. In terms of surface water drainage, the proposal seeks to mirror the storage and controlled discharge of the previous consent, and this presents a betterment over the uncontrolled discharge of the previous use. The Council's drainage engineer has reviewed recently submitted modelling detail of the amended system and has today confirmed in writing that the proposal is suitable for approval on drainage grounds, and the recommendation to members at the end of this presentation will be updated to account for this change. In terms of low carbon aspirations, the proposal is supported by commensurate detail similar to the previous consent and is considered to provide adequate outcomes aligned with the ambitions of the submitted energy statement. Finally, in terms of contamination, the current application is supported by the previous geotechnical assessments, together with additional updated detail. The detail has been considered by the Council's Senior Environmental Health Officer and the Environment Agency, and neither raised concerns or objections in terms of the risks from contamination. Considering the advice received, the proposal is considered suitable for approval, subject to the noted planning condition. So the updated officer recommendation to members, taking into account the positive comments from the Council's drainage engineer today, is one of approval, subject to the conditions as outlined, with the final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Housing, Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. Section 106 legal agreement to secure deferred obligations as identified, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm now going to call Dr. Rodney Horder, Chair of Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Forum, to address the meeting. Please be aware, Dr. Horder, that you have 5 minutes to speak, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. The Neighbourhood Forum supported approval of the previous application, P 2020-0497, but expressed concern regarding lack of affordable housing. As the forum continues to support the principles of this development, no consultee response was submitted. This proposal provides much-needed housing on a brownfield site that has been derelict for a number of years, and significant progress has been made with construction. The site was specifically allocated for housing by the forum in the neighbourhood plan as an addition to the local plan allocations. Torbay is not delivering affordable housing. In our opinion, commuting provision of affordable homes to a Section 106 requirement is simply providing some funds but postponing the provision of much-needed bricks and mortar. The forum would prefer to see the full allocation of 9 units delivered on site. However, if provision of 9 units is truly unviable, then a reduced number, not 0, should be provided, together with an appropriate Section 106 contribution. If this cannot be accomplished, then a watertight Section 106 condition must be in place to ensure the full Section 106 contribution. The forum notes the unresolved issues concerning drainage and waste management, and these are critical aspects of the planning consent process and must be fully resolved before consent can be given. In conclusion, the forum supports approval in principle, provided that these issues can be resolved. Approval of the surface water drainage scheme, which I see has now been done, management of waste, and the forum would like to see an additional condition included to deliver at least 50% of the affordable housing requirement on site, plus sufficient Section 106 funding. Thank you. On a further point, I've noticed my experience has been over the years I've been attending this, that we and other people make statements, and the points we make don't seem to surface in debate. And I think probably what's happening, you're overwhelmed with the officer report and a number of other things. So what I've done is actually give you a printed copy of the statement you can refer to now, and then if you have any items you'd like to bring up in the debate, it will be easier for you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Horder. I'd like to thank you for speaking in front of this committee and assure you that your statement has been heard. And that concludes the public representations on this item. So it's now time for committee members to ask their questions. Please may I remind members that questions should cover matters not already addressed in the officer's presentation. Is there anyone with a question? Councillor Fox.
Just following on, thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from what Dr. Forder has said in relation to affordable housing, it was something we asked on site earlier on, so all members will be sort of aware of that. And we were informed about the lack of viability on the number. But following from what Dr. Horder has said, I just wonder, is there a lower figure that in fact would be affordable? Because it is of concern to probably all members around the table that we're just not delivering sufficient numbers of affordable housing. It's a very serious issue in Torbay, and I therefore welcome the comments that have been made from the floor. And if there is a lower figure than 9, it would be helpful to know what that is. Or are we saying that even 0 or even 1 is one too many? I would like some consideration on that point, please, from the officers.
Thank you. So yes, so there is quite a sort of strict regime in terms of affordable housing and viability through the Council's adopted planning contributions supplementary planning document. So the scheme has previously been independently checked in terms of the viability outcomes, and was shown to be not it wasn't deliverable to deliver any affordable housing. Hence the proposal for Section 106 for a deferred obligation. So that position remains the same. The proposal is principally as previously approved. There's no additional floor space or change in circumstances. So the SPD does outline a process where through the independent viability, the way to secure potential affordable housing is through a deferred obligation, which is the concept proposed for this one, as with the previous application that preceded it as well.
If I could come back, Madam Chair, on this point. There's always a danger with deferred obligations that sites don't become available. I think there's a worry. I think the phrase that was used as bricks and mortar, and I'd entirely go along with that sentiment. Are you saying that not even one affordable housing unit is one too many, or is it just a general statement, or are you saying that it's just completely unaffordable?
So the established viability position was that it couldn't deliver any affordable housing. So it was purely through the deferred obligation clause, if for an obligation, if it became more viable.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Brooks.
Brooke.
No, sorry.
Just to reassure Dr. Forder, when I read the paperwork, I had two main questions, which was about affordable housing and waste disposal. So, I want to focus on the waste disposal and then back to affordable housing, if I may. Horder, thank you. Sorry, my hearing's not good. I noticed that Swisscode said they wouldn't do the waste disposal and recycling, etc., and therefore I understand for the developer they use a private contractor. What I'd like to ask is, what assurance do we have that will carry on in perpetuity for whilst the development is in place? Because obviously 44 units is an awful lot of waste and an awful lot of recycling, you know. So that's my first question. And the second one, Mr. Jones, on the affordable housing and this deferred obligation, can you just give us a little bit of an understanding of how that works? Just so we got a feel of potentially what might happen in the future, depending on various, prices they're sold for, etc. Thank you.
So thank you. So firstly, in terms of the waste management of the scheme, so yeah, as suggested, the scheme will be managed through a private service. The details of that are going to be framed through the proposed waste management plan condition, which is on the schedule within the report to members. So that seeks to ensure that we have appropriate recycling rates aligned with the council's ambitions, and that potentially would also provide the ability for the developer to agree with the local authority for waste collections. So principally that waste management plan will secure who delivers it, who delivers the service, the correct recycling rates, and that would be through the lifetime of the development as well.
Is that all you need, Councillor Brooke?
And on the deferred obligation for affordable housing, can you just give us an outline of how that actually works in practice?
So I am not an expert in deferred obligations and finances, but I say the process is established through the supplementary planning document, which is adopted with the council, in terms of once if a scheme is not viable to deliver affordable housing, it gets independently checked through the application stage. Obviously, previously it's been established that, because of its brownfield nature, the additional costs of that, of clearing the site and dealing with the contamination of the previous uses, that it couldn't afford to deliver the affordable housing. So in that concept, there's a deferred obligation, which principally means that if in the future the scheme becomes more viable than expected, i.e. such as the sales target, sales outcomes are more profitable, once it goes past the the established level of acceptable profit. The uplift above that is split between the developer and the council, and the additional profit would go towards affordable housing, which would be delivered off-site, obviously. But it's established through the adopted council's adopted document.
Thank you.
Councillor Verdi and then Councillor Darling.
I was just listening to the response there. I think if that is the case every time, there'll never be any affordable housing when viability of cost comes into it. Brownfield sites, there's nothing being developed for people to have affordable housing. And I'm wondering why the number of apartments have been reduced. Is this so that the developer is not obliged to?
It's not really a question. At this point, we're reaping questions, if that's all right. Can we bring it into debate later? Thank you. So, Councillor Darling, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I ask, I've seen quite a few projects like this where there hasn't been any affordable housing, and we all know how important that is. Can I ask who the independent body is that looks at a development and assesses whether it's viable to have any combination with it? Is it an outside body? Is it an outside body that does this, or is it something within, or who's the independent
Yes.
assessor?
So the independent assessor is commissioned by the authority. So who provides that assessment is instructed by the council. So the applicant will obviously submit their own viability work, which are commissioned by them. That work will be assessed by a third party, independent of that, which is instructed by the authority.
Thank you. I do struggle a bit with 44 apartments that just one or two can't be affordable. But anyway, okay. My next question is, I know there was talk about putting a gate on the site that would go onto Lymington Road, but I think it was decided against that. Do you know why that was? I think, to me, that looking at the schools, the local schools in the area, Upton St James, St Margaret's at the top of the hill, obviously you've got Torn Upton on the other side, having a gate onto Lymington Road would be quite a good thing to do, I would have thought. Do you know why that was taken out?
So the applicant suggested the reasons for not delivering the pedestrian access to Lymington Road that was part of the previous consent was principally down to the security of the site, making it a safer and more secure environment. The benefits of such a feature was considered, but considering the context of the site, its connections to the wider road and footpath network, although they would provide some benefit, it would be only a minor level of benefit. So it wasn't progressed between officers and the applicant in terms of the requirement to deliver that. So this, the site is relatively small. There's a short walk round, and a lot of the desire lines obviously can be met through other routes in the area, through going down through Parkfield Road, for example.
We have a comment which may be helpful from Mr. Blackwell.
Hello, so I just wanted to make the point it's incredibly important when we discuss affordable housing. We had a short briefing, didn't we, with our policy colleague earlier around housing, the new MPPF and the implications of that. I think it's just worth focusing that this application is around some changes to a consented scheme already. So it's worth focusing on those issues rather than affordable housing at the moment, although we do recognise that that's important. If there's something you'd like to debate separately as part of that conversation, I'm happy to do so, but just making the point needs to remain focused on what this application is for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Billing, I think you were next, followed by Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mr. Blackwell, for drawing the questions back to the key substance in this matter as well. Mr. Jones, as I do want to bring it up in debate later, though, I wonder if you could assist a little bit because it's relevant. you say in your report on page 24, in relation to the community community infrastructure levy contributions, that we're realising £30 per square metre. Looking at page 15, I was able to provide a rough estimate that we would be getting 120,000 in. Is that what we're actually capturing for SIL, please, around that figure?
So obviously, as previously mentioned, there is a consented scheme for the site as a whole, which included the 7 dwellings. That itself was still liable and has commenced, so there will be that application will be part way through the process. I think the still liability of the old scheme was around £205,000. A large proportion of that will be the apartment scheme. So principally, the SIL liability of this scheme will mirror the SIL liability of the previous scheme because the floor areas are principally the same. So it could be, depending on how far they're down with that liability, it could principally offset it. But the scheme as a whole was around £200,000 in SIL.
Okay,
the bulk of it being through this apartment scheme.
So this development, which we're considering now, or its precursor, more to the point, which had broadly the same volume based on the fact that we're ultimately looking at footprints here, as well as some additional dwellings which aren't part of this application. In aggregate, that was about 200,000 of SIL liability. Okay, that's really helpful. And just so I'm 100% clear, for the way that we calculate affordable housing contributions, because I believe that the last affordable housing and planning contributions SPD was recently revised in 2022, so under the last administration. At the moment, SIL liability is paid first, and only then, after you've captured SIL, do you look at affordable housing. Is that correct in the way that this is looked at? So there's a process. First you pay SIL, then once that is charged, then you look at affordable housing. Is that correct? Please.
Well, the affordable housing level would be looked at in the round in terms of the affordability. In terms of, obviously, you've got the cost to deliver the scheme. SIL obligations is one of those costs, much like decontamination, bill costs, etc. So. An obligation such as SIL would be in the mix in terms of a cost to the scheme that would impact affordable housing. David, have you got a comment?
I think Mr. Jones has answered the question, that in terms of the hierarchy of where obligations are sought, SIL would be sought, but would be required before Section 106 obligations such as affordable housing. So yes, SIL would take priority.
Thank you, Chair. That last clarification answered my question. Appreciate it.
You happy with that? Councillor Lewis, I think your question is next.
Thank you, Chair. There doesn't actually mention a number of charging points, electric charging points. And I know we've been through this so many times. Is it 20% of the...
I think it should be... I'll just have a quick look.
Just says identified electric charging facilities.
Sorry, if you just bear with me. So I'm certain it's detailed somewhere in the report. I believe there's it's the central area within the. So I'll just pop back to the internal layout, because there's a section that, of where the electric charging points are provided. But I believe there are 10 spaces. Yes. So I'm sure it's in the report. Here we have the internal layout. So we've got the 10 spaces centrally within so electric charging bays, so that central section there will provide electric charging points. So that's 10 spaces.
So will they be metered? I mean, are they separate and are they metered? Because I mean, they're not assigned to specific apartments, are they? They're just for people to come and use ad hoc.
I'm not sure how that would be for the future management of the scheme, whether people have a preference for that or whether they're assigned or not to certain apartments. So that's not a detail that I have within the application for you, I'm afraid.
And I presume that the 7 houses have their own charging points.
The 7 houses from the yes, they've got electric charging. So that's outside of this proposal. It's the tighter site.
Are there any other members with questions at this time? Nothing that hasn't been picked up. Councillor Fox, go ahead.
It's it's a kind of question or request of the officers really, but under the section 106 heading, I just wonder whether it would be useful if we could just put down bullet points or some way of indicating what the points that are being covered by the section 106 are, just as an easier way. So it's not a criticism, it's just a suggestion, perhaps, in terms of the look of the report.
Happy to see that as constructive criticism. Yeah, we can definitely do that in the future. We'll look to give you as much information as you need. We're sort of obviously conscious of the amount of paperwork you need to read, but if that's a request, happy to do that.
Councillor Billings.
Chair, I'd endorse that request. I think heads of terms is the phrase we might be looking for. I think we don't need to see the full document, but the headings of what it will contain and what it seeks to address, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Billings has put that slightly more succinctly than I did. It is the heads of terms that we're looking for.
Noted. Any further questions at this point? If not, we'll move to debate now. Councillor Verdi, did you want to kick off since you were a little previous?
I can kick off. I was a bit premature there. I've lost my train of thought. Now, I was thinking Brown sites aren't given any affordable housing. All the developments I've seen haven't had any. I'd like to be corrected on that. But in terms of affordability, as you aforementioned there, I can't believe that will happen in the future. This site was supposed to have 9, I believe, but now we're down to 0. How did that happen? Is that because the top floor has negated that and the developer didn't want to pay towards affordable housing? That's the point I want to make.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. And over to you, Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to draw colleagues' attention to the key points that I think we're considering as a committee in this application. If I understand it correctly from the office team, we're looking at some changes to the fenestration, which is effectively the mullions in the windows. We're looking at some minor elevation changes, which effectively mean we can inset in part of the gables, which I thought looked much more visually attractive when on site. We're looking to a change where the roofing covering is man-made rather than natural slate. Well, colleagues will have probably seen you can't see much of the roof from ground level, or at least to that extent you can. It's not really hugely visually apparent. And also we've got a revised interior layout. I didn't think that any of those changes, and colleagues, please tell me if there are others that I've failed to highlight that I think are relevant here. I didn't see that any of those were so substantive that we would be in a position where we'd be seeking to refuse this application. So in due course, Chair, I'd like to put a marker down that I will be seeking to put a resolution to approve. I do, well, seeing as we're in debate, though, I do just want to focus a little bit on the point that Councillor Verdi made. I think he makes a very good one, but perhaps some of the solutions go beyond this committee. It doesn't feel right to me that we are, on the one hand, as a council, using the current Affordable Housing and Planning Contributions SPD that was recently approved before the election. It doesn't feel right to me that we are prioritising contributions towards sports groups and community clubs, which is effectively what SIL is paying for, whilst also saying there's a huge housing crisis, and only once those contributions are provided do we then look at affordable housing. Now, colleagues, if you think that's the right order of priority, please tell me. Maybe it's not just this application that we should be debating it to, but it's as good a time as any, perhaps. It would have occurred to me that perhaps affordable housing should be looked at first, and then once affordable housing is provided, we should look at SIL. I wasn't party to the discussions that took part previously. Maybe there was some very clear thinking that I currently haven't been involved in that has that order of hierarchy or laid out to it. But that's something that's perhaps we should be looking at on. Again, I think we had a previous application where we had a viability assessment as part of it. It would really help members if we had more oversight as part of that, and so perhaps we could ask for an update or maybe sign off on that, Chair, to be brought to a future planning committee at a future date, just so members can be involved in that process, and we can give to the public confidence in the decision taking by ensuring that part of the decision is taken in public rather than at a later date where the public don't have access to that. Because going back to my earlier description of this application, the bit that I think has the most public interest isn't the elevation changes, isn't the internal layout, isn't the roof covering. I think it's the affordable housing component, and I don't think therefore we should be signing off on that entirely in private at a later date. I think we should bring that component back to a committee. So that was my points for debate. As I say, I'd like to make a resolution, put forward a proposal for approval, and I'll do that in a minute, but I just want to see what other colleagues have to say first. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I'd agree with that order of priorities as well. I think all of us, whatever party, are concerned about the lack of affordable housing in Torbay is critical, and any way we can address that has got to be welcomed. So I agree with what Councillor Billings has said.
Anyone have any other matters for debate at this point? Yes, over to you, Mr. Patrol.
Chairman, I'm not sure what Councillor Billings is suggesting. I mean, normally the section 106 agreement would provide the formula and mechanism for determining the affordable housing contribution in the deferred viability assessment we're looking at here, and therefore there would be limited discretion there. There would be the opportunity to question figures, but in essence the mechanism by which the affordable housing contribution would be calculated is set out in the 106 as it was for the previous application, and partly, well, obviously in addition the applicant and the developer want certainty as to what they're going to have to pay, and that certainty is set out in the formula. Would
you like to comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would, Chair. I think where think the point I was seeking to address, I wasn't wanting to bring to a meeting of the planning committee an explanation to members of what one can find by looking at the SPD on the internet. It would take all of a few moments to do that. That wasn't so much the best use of this committee's time. I was more interested in, we are, if I understand it, at some later date going to look at the viability of the scheme to see whether there was the opportunity to levy an affordable housing contribution, and presumably there is going to be a decision point that actually no affordable housing contribution or no further affordable housing contribution would be possible from this scheme because it would make it unviable. Could Mr. Cattrall help me with how that process, how that decision not to levy any additional fees is made, in what context, so therefore I can understand the best way to phrase any slight amendment to the officer recommended sort of proposals that we have before us. Thank you.
I think in general that as I think the planning officer indicated, is that the developer would propose provide the figures for proposing what the contribution, if any, should be, and it would then be usually for the council to dispute that if they thought that was incorrect. That's generally how it would be done, and at the end of the day, generally there would be arbitration in terms of if there was a dispute as to that.
Did you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Go ahead,
yeah,
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got a few takeaways from this committee now, from the site visit, from the briefing, and from this meeting. I think about our processes, what we include, the transparency of the process, I guess you pointed out there, what we include in our reports, how we approach affordable housing. We've talked about the new MPPF. We talked about a range of things that I think, that's why we brought David Pickover from our policy team here today. But that, again, that's further away from what you're here to decide in terms of this planning application. But I take all these things on board, and I think it'd be useful to set up some briefings and some of those open discussions to see how we can refine the way we do things. So they were really valid points, but again, back to the focus of this application, I think. But thank you.
So thank you for all those contributions on this matter. Perhaps we can follow that up outside of the meeting. So are there any other points for debate at this point in time? If not, is there perhaps somebody willing to put a proposal? Councillor Billings?
Yes, Chair. As I indicated, I'd be putting forward approval in line with the officer recommendation, but subject to a further condition, which brings back the assessment of the affordable housing viability to the committee at the point where the decision is made at a later date. And the reason for that, Chair, is so that we can have that decision taken in public for the benefit of public confidence on that point. Thank you, Chair. That would be my proposal.
Thank you. Noted. That has been seconded now by Councillor Fox. And is this, do we have any other comments regarding conditions at all? Is there anything else that we want to develop at this point? Okay, so perhaps we could have a summing up of that matter. Is that possible? So we'll just go ahead and take a vote on that. It's been seconded. Would you like to, with a show of hands, show your support for this? Thank you. Or not? I think that is unanimous now from the councillors. Thank you very much. At this point, I will now ask Mr. Jones to please sum up this proposition.
I've got nothing further to add, sorry.
Sorry, getting it going round in circles a little bit. In fact, we can move on to item number 6 of the agenda, which is very good news, to consider an application for Quintaville residential home, 1 Quinta Road, Torquay, application number P/2023/0327. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak, but before they do so, I will ask Scott Jones to please introduce this application.
Thank you. So the site sits at the junction of Quinta Road and Redenhill Road and currently holds a 3-storey building that was previously used as a care home, which ceased use approximately 5 years ago. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing building and the redevelopment of the site to provide 14 apartments within a 3-storey L-shaped building with parking and waste storage to the rear, together with integrated cycle parking in the building. The revised accommodation, following a recent amendments, will present 1 times 3-bed unit, 8 2-bed apartments, and 5 1-bed apartments. These will be supported by 10 car parking spaces and the cycle and waste storage. So firstly, I have a couple of slides regarding the context. This first one is the local plan designations map that shows no particular designations over the land. You see the site there is circled at the bottom of the slide. So the only reference is the reference to the emerging neighbourhood plan housing allocation at the time. More broadly, the map does, however, show various green spaces within the local area, along with 2 designated shopping areas, which are depicted by the blue shading. These are Redenhill Road to the northeast and Plainmoor to the northwest. In terms of the Torquay neighbourhood plan, the site is allocated for housing under policy TH1 with site reference TMPH10. More broadly, again, the plan shows various green spaces within the local area, these being formally identified as local green spaces, outlined in green. In terms of this aerial imagery, I have a couple of slides that shows a bit of the context. Firstly, we have here a slide showing the residential setting and the prominent corner plot location. You also see it sits as a sort of a transition area between the tight and urban grain to the west, the left-hand side of the slide, to the looser, denser, less dense character to the east. This shows the wider context of the site a bit clearer, again with the red dot central in the slide showing the site. In terms of facilities and services in the area, there is a primary school 100 metres away, a secondary school 300 metres away near to Plainmoor. Again, there are 2 shopping areas within close proximity, with Redenhill Road 300 metres to the northeast and Plainmoor approximately 700 metres to the northwest. There are also 2 allotment sites within 400 metres, and as mentioned, numerous public green spaces within 800 metres, including Babcombe Downs, Walls Hill, Carey Park, Quinta Road, Warbury Copse, Brewery Park and Tessier Gardens. So just some street imagery of the site that members saw today in the earlier site visit. It holds a 3-storey building with a mansard roof in generally poor repair, and a 2-storey element where it intersects with the adjacent terrace on Redenhill Road. This is a street view from the Quinta Road side. Again, it shows the current state of the building and detrimental features such as the metal staircasing. And also to the rear of the plot, you've got some glimpse views there of the flat roof extensions that dominate the rear. In the foreground, you have the only parking facility for the current use. So just moving on to the existing layout. So the existing building held a 23-bed care home. There was a landscape setting around the two public borders of Redenhill Road and Quinta Road. And going up through the building, say the extent of flat roofing in dark grey to the rear of the plot. And also shows the layout of the internal care use. Obviously there's a number of small bedrooms there. And up through to the second floor. And obviously there it shows the extent of the two-storey flat roof extension that connects to the Redenhill Road terrace on the right-hand side of this slide. Just some external elevations confirming what members saw today in terms of the mansard roof form and the flat roof extensions and joined to the adjacent terrace, and the Quinta Road elevation as well. This is a sort of side and rear extension view you see when you're coming down through Quinta Road towards the site. And so moving on to the proposal, as mentioned, this is a full application for the demolition of the existing building and its redevelopment to provide 14 apartments. So, as mentioned, the development provides a 3-storey L-shaped building with 10 car parking spaces and waste storage to the rear, and integrated cycle parking near to the entrance to the building at the upper area. Access to the parking is created off Quinta Road, widening the existing access point. And the revised accommodation is 1 3-bed unit, 8 2-bed units, and 5 1-bed units. So the red dotted line depicts the current building lines, which the proposal will bring the development closer to both Redenhill Road and Quinta Road. The step back from Redenhill Road will be approximately 2 metres and will align with the sort of building line of the adjacent bay detail. The setback from Quinta Road will be around 2.8 metres to the edge of the public footpath, and that will be a uniform distance along that elevation. So the ground floor units will have small private terraces and also access to the green space around the building. And so moving up to the first floor, we have 5 units provided, 4 units having private balconies, and also the recessed building line where it joins the adjacent property on Redenhill Road is shown here. And the second floor, again, that's 4 units provided, with 3 having private balconies. And the building line recesses slightly deeper into the adjacent terrace to provide some relief to the join, which we will see here on plan. So these are the 2 principal elevations of the proposal, addressing Redenhill Road in the top half of the slide and Quinta Road in the bottom half of the slide. As clearly shown, the building form is flat roofed and it's brick finished, with staggered building lines and bay details providing some interest to the 2 main elevations. As mentioned, 11 of the 14 apartments will have terraces or balconies. And the windows are presented in a sort of uniform and vertically emphasised arrangement to reference the adjacent bay details of the terrace properties off Redenhill Road. So these are the top half is the view looking down from Quinta Road to the side of the building and its main entrance, along with the cycle parking area, which is the dark hatched area, along with the elevations that will front the internal parking court. Surface water runoff is to be managed through a controlled discharge to the public sewer via an attenuation tank underneath the car park area as shown. And this proposal will provide betterment to the uncontrolled system that presently connects to the public sewer. So this is an indicative plan, as the building lines have changed, being recessed further away from the public road. So the landscaping area shown here will be larger, but it does show the ambitions to provide a mixed native hedge border, some verticality with some small tree species planted towards Redden Hill Road, and to provide some planting with high biodiversity value, as suggested within the supporting ecology document. It's proposed to secure the final proposed landscaping through a planning condition. So in terms of the key issues and material considerations, in terms of headlines, the principle of the development, drawing together the policy landscape, there is clear support for the provision of a residential use. This is based on the site's brownfield character and location within a well-connected suburban residential area, and also its allocation within the Torquay neighbourhood plan for housing. In terms of design, and with all matters considered, the material form and overall character of the building is considered positive and will maintain suitably scaled and detailed building for its context. It also adequately acknowledges local character, and when considering the policy guidance, it is considered in accordance with the development plan and presents good design. In terms of amenity, having regard for the living environment for future occupants and the future relationship with adjacent plots and neighbouring occupants, the scheme is considered to provide a good standard of accommodation and will not unduly impact adjacent occupiers. In terms of highways and movement, the proposal delivers 10 car parking spaces for 14 units, which is below the development plan expectation of 1 parking space per unit and some form of visitor parking. Notwithstanding this level of parking, it's considered acceptable following the submission of a street parking survey, as requested by the Highway Authority, that has demonstrated that the deficiency can be sufficiently accommodated within the immediate area on street. This judgment is also offered, appreciating the current building and previous use is also deficient of parking and would have itself had some impact on street parking pressures in the area through staff and visitors. The recommendation is also subject to securing funding towards sustainable travel mode enhancements in the area, which is part of the recommendation to members. And in terms of the detailed layout, recent revisions have also increased the size of the 3 parking spaces adjacent to walls to resolve concerns on the accessibility of the parking layout. The proposals are now considered acceptable on highway and movement grounds and are supported by the Highway Authority. In terms of ecology, there is limited ecology value on site, and subject to the planning conditions detailed, this will positively frame the construction and operational ecology outcomes and provides biodiversity enhancement measures in accordance with local plan policy. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the proposal provides betterment by replacing the existing uncontrolled discharge to the public sewer with a controlled provision at greenfield rates, and is considered comfortably aligned with the aims and objectives of local plan policies on this matter. In terms of low carbon development, the application is supported by an energy statement, and the ambitions of the document are supported and should be secured by a planning condition as proposed in the schedule. And in terms of secure design, the application package is absent of specific detail in terms of crime and disorder, and it's proposed that a planning condition should secure understanding of matters to design out crime. So the Officer recommendation to members is one of approval, subject to the conditions as outlined, with final drafting delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, a legal agreement to secure sustainable transport obligation of £3,440, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm now going to call Dr. Rodney Horder, once again, Chair of Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Forum. As you know, Dr. Horder, you have 5 minutes to speak, and the clerk will let you know when you have a minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. This is development on a brownfield site and will contribute to Torbay's housing needs. Thus, the proposal justifies support in principle. The site was included in the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan as an allocation for 10 apartments. Although this is not an upper limit, from a practical point of view, there is parking space for only 10 vehicles, so provision of 14 apartments will place a further burden upon the on-street parking. Although it is in a sustainable location, reasonably close to hub facilities, public transport is currently limited. Consequently, we can foresee most residents owning cars, so there could be competition for the parking spaces. Outside space is limited and below policy requirements, but the Forum agrees that this can be mitigated by the proximity of public open spaces. The Forum acknowledges that there is no policy requirement for this number of dwellings to deliver affordable housing. However, we hope that the purchase prices will be in the range of affordability for current residents of Torbay. The Forum is aware that a similar conversion of a care home to residential use, 51 to 53 Warren Road, appears to be in use as an HMO prior to construction of the consented changes. In order to comply with policies for HMOs, we request that a condition is added to state that the property shall be occupied only by persons living as part of single households and that the property shall not be used as a Class 4 HMO. Although not fully compliant with policies, the Forum accepts a tilted balance of the delivery of much-needed housing, so this proposal is supported. Thank you. So once again, I will pass the statement out.
Thank you, Dr. Horder. Next to speak will be Jan Tribble and Richard Crook, who will address the meeting together in support of the application. Please be aware you will share 5 minutes speaking time between you, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Just one of you.
Richard will join me afterwards.
I see.
We're not a tag team.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, the reason for being here today speaking in support of the proposals is to set out the wider benefits of the scheme. Not simply new homes, but the social and sustainability benefits. As you know, offers a recommendation for approval for the scheme, and there are no objections from any consultees, and that's key, as the only public objections are on parking. And I can say with confidence that this is a perfect site for new homes, a derelict building and an eyesore for the community, and now attracting antisocial behaviour. A brownfield site, and as such a vote for sustainable development. It's an allocated site in the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan, so supported by the community. New homes will be set in an existing residential area on the edge of Ellicombe, a 5-minute walk from local shops at Babacombe, close to primary schools and secondary schools, and has great access to public amenities, Quinta Park, Babacombe Downs and local beaches. In terms of planning policy, it delivers essential quality housing, not luxury apartments or second homes. The units count towards the 5-year housing supply. It delivers community-led development through the neighbourhood plan. And the development of brownfield sites helps address Torbay's commitment to the climate emergency. The scheme's for 14 homes to take the place of a derelict building. Each has its own external terrace and with ground floor units benefiting from garden space. A secure cycle store for 14 units is incorporated into the building adjacent to the front door to encourage the growing trend of e-bike use. Car parking on the site is for 10 spaces, including 1 disabled space, with 4 one-bedroom units receiving cycle vouchers. Torbay Highways Department advised that the impact of anything below 14 spaces must be determined by a Lambeth survey. An independent survey was commissioned to walk the streets within a 3-minute zone of the site, counting the available on-street parking, and the facts were surprising. In the period surveyed, there were over 40 on-street parking spaces available of a given evening. With this evidence, Torbay Highways confirmed there is no impact on the on-street parking, and the Highways Department support the proposal for 10 spaces. A motion for approval today, therefore, is a vote for delivering sustainable, community-led housing in a ward desperate for new homes. And with that, I'll hand over to Richard, developer and building owner.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just a bit of history. I was born in Readvertised Road, right opposite Quintaville, number 34. I went to Barbican Primary School. I walked past it every day for 12 years. My dad actually did the maintenance for the Murphy family that used to own Quintaville and built most of the en-suites that are there today. We finally bought Quintaville after 2 years in the negotiation with the Murphy family. They had let it closed 6 years ago after they had let it go to ruins, really, and it doesn't look very good in the local area as you drive by. We've already started to have antisocial behaviour there. We've had kids break in, leaving their alcoholic glasses and stuff in the building that we've had to go and clear up and make secure again. We just want to make some good local flats for good local people. Yeah, we're not going to be, selling it for massive prices. We're in a good Ellicombe, Barbican area, and we want good local people to be able to invest in it. Yes, we've only got 10 parking spaces, but as Jan has said, we've had the independent survey done that proves that there's plenty of on-site parking nearby, especially in Quinta Road, which most of the people have off-site parking there anyway. Yes.
1 minute remaining.
1 minute. Oh, that's good. Yeah, we're going to give cycle vouchers to people that don't have parking spaces. We have plenty of e-bike space within the design. And unfortunately, as the gentleman over here has said, brownfield sites are very expensive to build. And unfortunately, without planning permission for 14 flats, the site wouldn't be viable. And unfortunately, we'd go back onto the market if we don't get planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for speaking in front of this committee. Your comments have been heard. And that concludes the representations from our registered speakers, and it's the turn of committee members to ask their questions. May I remind members that questions should cover matters not already addressed in the officer's presentation. We have a questioner straight away. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to put Mr. Halder's mind at rest. That was my question as well about the HMOs. I have concerns about that and wanted to make sure that that condition would be in there, that they could not change of use to HMOs, Class C4 HMOs, just to make sure that that's in there. Thank you. Also, as regards to the 10 parking spaces, 20% of electric charging spaces takes us to 3. So there would only be 7 normal parking spaces and 3 electric charging spaces. And although there has been the survey regarding the on-road, Quinta Road and Readvertised Road, I was there yesterday morning because I couldn't do the site visits today, and we couldn't get parked. So I don't know if that would be the norm on a Sunday morning or whenever the the survey was done? Can you tell me when the survey was done, please?
I can't tell you when the survey was done. I can maybe try and find out. It may take a few minutes, I'm afraid. But obviously, there's a certain criteria to the survey in terms of how far you go and when you do the survey. Obviously, that satisfied the Highway Authority in terms of the survey results. And they were satisfied with that. But I can't tell you off the top of my head when the survey was undertaken, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Brooke.
Yes, thank you very much for the report, Mr. Jones. I read the parking method statement because I was interested in the 10 to the 14, and to help my colleague, Councillor Lewis, it was done in September, and it was because it was changed from August, because August was deemed it was a holiday period. Families could be away, so it was moved to September, and it was done in early hours of 2 mornings. So that might help. One of my questions was regarding the money towards the sustainable transport, though, because I understand the arguments with the Lambeth parking and with the previous use that there's okay towards the 10 parking spaces and compared to 14. But the question I have is, how is that, you know, there's been a formula, it's been derived, 3,440 quid. I work that's £860 per each one-bedroom apartment. But where's that kind of money, where does it go? You know, what sustainable transport in the area might it be linked to? Or does it disappear into some nebulous pot? And that the answer to that might then vary what I might ask later on. Thank you.
Yeah, so the figure is, you're correct, it's £860 per unit, and that's based from a formula within the planning obligations adopted document. So the obligation is 3,440. So that would be ring-fenced to specifically for sustainable transport options schemes, improvements in the area. At the moment, obviously, there's not a specific scheme that's been identified, so it would be principally at this point ring-fenced and then used to either with other obligations to fund a larger scheme or used specifically for something. But yeah, so it would be ring-fenced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I've got 3 quick questions, if we may, please. Were we to grant consent for this, what time frame would be typically on the decision notice, please? In previous applications, the committees sought to shorten a time frame when it was an outline consent. Because this is a detailed application, what time frame would typically be on this, please?
So the time frame to commence the development would be 3 years as a standard time frame.
Thank you. That's the first question. The comment from the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum regarding an aspiration to avoid either the existing the permitted premises being used as a class permitted development rights. Is that the way that you advise that be addressed if one was seeking to do that, please?
Yes, principally a planning condition could readily address that one.
Okay, and if we were to use reasons for example, addressing amenity in the local area and the importance of parking and local services, would you as a professional officer consider those would be appropriate reasons that would substantiate that condition?
Yeah, certainly that you could say that the dynamics would be changed in terms of potential parking pressures through that. So yes, certainly parking would be an appropriate reason for that condition.
Thank you. And that brings me back to my final question. Parking as a topic, clearly very important. Thinking through, though, that we're assessing the difference between the parking situation that will result from were we to consent this proposal we've got in front of us, and also the developer's fallback position, which could be, for example, to go back to the nursing home and reopen it. Could you help me with an understanding of how many car parking spaces would be available on site were the nursing home to be reopened, and your view as your best assessment in terms of the amount of parking requirement the operation of that facility would require, and therefore what the road parking demand would be currently were the premises in use, please?
Yeah, so as members saw on the site visit today, the previous care use, which could obviously be brought back into use, was largely deficient from parking. There was an access and a parking area. It didn't seem to express the character that would be used for visitors or staff. So it would appear that the development was or could be in the future devoid of parking. A care use, I think generally you'd expect the policy standard for a care use is one space for 8 rooms. So principally you expect that a new proposal for a care facility of that scale would require 3 parking spaces to be policy compliant. So you could say that it's broadly 3 spaces light in its terms of its historic use. The proposal is 4 spaces deficient. So you're principally potentially talking about a space between the two. There is a slight difference in character in terms of when open residential use, the pressures are, evenings, weekends, to the care facility, but obviously you would have 24-hour staff there, so there would be pressures as well throughout the evening and night time through staff and also through visitors as well. So there are all the considerations, obviously, presented in terms of coming to that rounded position that considering the current use, deficiency of parking, also the survey that was requested by the Highway Authority that was considered satisfactory, and the potential obligation as well being sought that in the round that's sufficient to obviously provide a supportive position in terms of highways and movement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Are there any... Councillor Tymon has a question.
In terms of the construction management plan, often on developments like this, the demolition of an existing building is actually a bigger consequence than the construction. Are we aware whether there will be a need for any temporary road closures or anything else that will pull us out from disruption beyond the immediate site? Has that been explored?
No, not party to the implications of what the demolition or the construction phase would bring. Obviously, there is a proposed condition to try and manage that in terms of ensuring that the impacts on neighbours are limited. Obviously, if there was impacts on the highway itself, they would obviously need to be in conversation with the Highway Authority in terms of those, which would obviously help probably manage that process or any impacts.
Question, please go ahead.
Very briefly to follow up. So none of those discussions have happened to this point, as far as you're aware?
Correct. No discussions on that.
Thank you. Did you want to ask a question, Councillor Fox, and then we'll go to Councillor Darling afterwards?
I'm just trying to get my head around the relationship with the adjoined building on Redden Hill Road. I wonder if we could put the elevation up again, showing the proposal on Redden Hill Road. Right, so there's a kind of white triangle on the right-hand side between the proposed structure and the next door neighbour. Could I just have some advice as to, or information as to what that triangle is going to be? Is it a triangle of demolition, taking out, or is it part of the proposed development, or what happens to it?
So obviously that sits outside of the land ownership of the applicant. So that's obviously is part of the neighbour's property. So any sort of impacts of the demolition would principally be managed through agreement between the two parties in terms of making good, etc. But yeah, so you say because that triangle sits outside of the site, that would be unaltered. I think there'll be a retained element of the adjacent building, unless it was addressed through obviously agreement between the two parties.
So you're satisfied that will not in any way jeopardise this application?
Not to my mind. I think that's something that obviously there's a historic relationship there that will be managed between the two parties through agreement. And as you say, that the making good outside of the site is obviously separate to the proposal before members. Okay.
I think you had a question, Councillor Darling. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk about the security of the building because I noticed it makes reference in the report to the need to ensure the building is secure and to possibly consider an entry system or something like that. Is that something that we have to make as a recommendation, or is that something that is taken from the report and is automatically done?
So thank you. So within the proposed conditions list, there is a secured by design condition, which principally seeks detail on demonstrating that the design of the building meets the secured by design standards. So that's obviously that would be it. Yeah, so that frames the detail of the build.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions, please, members? I have a comment, please, from Mr. Blackwell.
I haven't butted it in.
Oh, did you?
I have got a point to make, but
please go ahead with your point.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I'd butted in front of someone. Just to distill some of those comments. So you've asked us a few questions there, and that goes back to the officers challenging around highway comments, asking for a survey. That survey was done, and we assessed that. Highways have then got no objection, so that was one of those challenges. Also challenged around the design of the building, and the scheme was amended subtly to make some changes to make sense of those, and also slightly refined, more information around cycle storage. You sort of touched on the policy point actually there, Councillor Brooke, around what does sustainable transport contributions contribute to, and I sort of think we probably do need to answer that a little bit more fully. So just really that goes back to our planning contributions and affordable housing SPD, which adopted in December 2022. Just going back to those priority of projects, so highway safety, promoting active travel, walking, cycling, thinking about where the site is, the topography, but also the links to football grounds, various schools, allotments, parks, Babacombe Downs, the South West Coast Path. So there's a high list of priorities there around walking, cycling, thinking about health, and also thinking about the bus network, not rail in that position, but the bus network around there. And there is a bus route that runs around Babacombe Road. And also thinking about conditions. So there is a condition that we could add around HMOs, and I think Mr. Jones has agreed that, but also around, I think there was a refinement to one of the conditions that Councillor Timon brought up around timings as well. So construction management plan, time of work, which we'll need to refine as well. So if we can put that in the minutes, that changing weekend working one. So we'll just refine that. So thanks for that. I just thought I'd bring some of those questions to a bit more of a fuller conclusion.
Thank you, that was really helpful. Any further questions before we move into debate? So please, if anyone has something they would like to speak, we're going to debate this now. Councillor Billings, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to provide a couple of my thoughts on this, and then I'd like to put a motion on before the committee for further debate. So I think the scheme we've got in front of us is really positive on a number of factors. Certainly the choice of materials, I think they're sustainable over the long term for the type of use of the building that's being proposed. I've got in my mind the sheltered housing development of Whitley Court at the junction of Totnes Road, Penmore Way and Hayes Road, which has recently been redecorated. It's a white rendered building, very similar to this, where it has a parapet wall design without large overhangs, and the people maintaining that building are often having to repaint it in order to ensure that it shows its best. And whilst white rendered buildings look amazing, they also bring with them maintenance liabilities. I think for the choice of site, the prominent location, particularly on the junction of two roads, actually the decision to have a brick finish here is very sensible, and I commend the developer for that. A little bit saddened though that they haven't provided us with a construction method statement at this time. It would have been helpful, I think, for committee members to have seen one of those, and also officers to have had one as included in part of the application pack, particularly where you've got adjoint buildings that are physically attached to them, just so members can be fully assured that the demolitions work's not going to cause any impacts to that. But from my perspective, that's something that maybe we can look up the council at a later date. I'd also like to, I mentioned it with the previous development, draw attention to the SIL contribution. The SIL contribution here of £78,000 is from my perspective a material consideration that we do need to sort of really have in our minds. That's helping provide lots of useful community infrastructure in the wider Torquay area. And while I appreciate there's not affordable housing in this development, there is that very, very substantial contribution. Thinking through, I raised the point about parking. I do hear the point that my colleague Councillor Lewis was saying earlier in relation to when she's gone to look at the development, parking position wasn't ideal. Certainly take on board the point also made by the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum by Dr. Horder. But equally, I didn't think that we were at the parking position when this development is implemented will be that worse than the developer's fallback position. If I may, colleagues, we're probably comparing it in my eyes with an empty building that's causing no parking demand and a proposal for apartments. And if we looked at actually the use as a nursing home, it's not ideal, but I don't think the detriment compared to that is that damaging. And then that leads me to talk about two other points, I can do those as part of the proposal. So, Chair, I'd like to propose approval. I'd like to do that in accordance with the officer recommendation. I'd like to suggest an amendment to the condition in relation to the construction management plan to require that to be signed off by officers, and also to address the issues in respect of the suggested wording that are in the report. I'd like to suggest a condition that the decision notice has a time period for commencement of 2 years, not 3, picking up points that our committee's raised on other applications to get development moving. I'm sure we all want to see this site developed. That's what I heard from the applicant, and so I hope that won't be too onerous. And then I'd like to suggest a condition to remove permitted development rights in relation to Class 4 HMA usage to address the other point that was made by the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. So I'd like to table that for the discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So the proposal is that the application be approved, subject to conditions. And is there a seconder perhaps for these? And thank you very much, Councillor Verdi. Is there any further debate on this? Thank you. So there seems to be nothing more, and I can call. Would you like to make any comments, Councillor Jones, or is that's enough? We will then just.
No further comments from me.
Thank you very much. We will pass to the vote. Please show by raising your hands whether you approve this motion. Thank you, and that's unanimous. Perfect. So that brings our agenda to the close. I think you will find that It is 7 o'clock. We have to just record the time. 9 minutes past 7, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.